Okay, great. Hello, everybody. My name is Gina Giampaolo. I'm a designer and a front-end developer, and I specialize in building sustainable design and development systems, processes, and workflows. I also run a meetup for people interested in the decentralized web called Dat Night. And tonight, I'm going to share ideas about new models for building on the web, decentralized or not, particularly how we can look to the natural world as a guiding framework. I'll also share a bit about my efforts to build a community around this kind of stuff here in Portland. So first off, a primer, what's the decentralized web? The traditional network architecture is the centralized network on the left there, where all nodes send their data to one central node, a server, which then sends the data to the intended recipient. A whole lot of the internet is built this way right now. In the middle, there's a decentralized network, which looks like many centralized networks in communication with one another. The benefit of this is that the network doesn't rely on a single server. Federated networks operate in this way. A great example would be Mastodon. And I like this one because it feels human. It feels like it represents neighborhoods gathered into hubs. And then there's the distributed network, where there's no central server and each node is connected to various other nodes. The DAT protocol is peer-to-peer. It's also how services like Napster and BitTorrent work. So these models are nothing new. In fact, the internet was not centralized at the beginning. This diagram is from 1964 in a paper written by Paul Barron. And these are fascinating and exciting old ways to build new things that put power back in the hands of the individuals. But we're missing out on this opportunity if we're not also radically reconsidering our entire process when we're building in this new/old way. So here's my manifesto for the internet of the future. I think that we need to explore new models. Today I'll be focusing on models from the natural world. I think that we need to pioneer accessibility across all fronts. We need to value and foreground education with a special focus on how we use language. And we need to build and nurture communities of people working in this space, especially offline. So the thing that I'm most excited to share with you today, and the title of the talk, is ideas about new models for building on the web. And I'm excited because all of these new models, just like centralization, are actually old models. Some of them are even ancient. First off, I'd like to talk about my favorite protocol of all. It's the Wood Wide Web. That is what scientists call it. I did not make that up. I wish that I did because it's very good. But basically, a forest is a cooperative system. Trees and plants communicate with one another via large fungal networks. In fact, the largest organism in the world is a fungal network just beneath the surface of the earth right here in Oregon. These networks are facilitated by a symbiotic or mutually beneficial relationship between mycorrhizal fungi and trees. The fungi grow on the roots of trees and plants and provide them with water and nutrients in exchange for sugars. 90% of land plants are believed to be connected via some sort of mycorrhizal network, which in practice act as a sort of large-scale neural network on which the health of a forest depends. In a thriving forest, there are many diverse bioprotocols working together. You have fungi and animals, trees, plants, and microorganisms, and all of these protocols work to ensure the year-round success of a forest. For example, a coniferous tree, that is a tree with needles like pine and fir trees, they ferry nutrients via these networks to deciduous trees when they're asleep in the winter when they don't have leaves and they're not actively photosynthesizing. So-called mother trees help saplings in their shade get the nutrients they need so they can eventually grow to reach and join the main tree canopy and become self-sufficient. These networks even have similar problems as ours. Certain species of orchid are known to hack the system to gain access to nutrients without giving anything in return. Other species, like black walnut, are bad actors, slowly poisoning the trees around them in an effort to hoard nutrients for themselves. But for the most part, forest ecosystems are inherently socialist. They support one another with resources, they store them for later, they help the young and the weak, and they signal when defenses need to be raised. They limit their size and they self-police their communities, and they act as stewards of forest land use. Gardens are a similar kind of ecosystem, albeit one helped along by humans. I love to imagine the future of networks and applications as gardens that grow as we care for them. So this is my plot, my real garden, in the Sewell Crest Community Garden in Southeast Portland. In planting and caring for my garden, I'm setting it up for success by doing things to leverage and support natural processes. I'm planting pollinator plants to attract beneficial bees, ladybugs, and butterflies. I'm planning to rotate my crops, ensuring future success. I'm pairing plants that have symbiotic relationships with one another, and I'm amending the soil with nutrients when appropriate. So we can look at this in a micro to macro powers of 10 kind of way. On the left is my plot, and on the right top is an aerial view of the garden with my plot on the lower right. When I work in the community garden, I'm aware that the ecosystem of this garden affects the surrounding community, and I act accordingly. There's my plot within this space, and then there are the plots of my neighbors and friends. And then in the bottom right photo, there's the adjacent park and elementary school, the students of which work in the community garden. They're being actively educated by the stewards of the garden. There's the greater neighborhood that reaps the benefits of having a garden nearby, in that there are programs to facilitate gardeners sharing their extra produce. Nearly everybody wins in this arrangement. And I think that the most important thing happening in a garden is care, which is just as important in human communities as it is in plant communities. The peer-to-peer web is a unique lens for thinking this way because it mirrors human relationships. It mirrors a conversation. It's not someone on a bullhorn announcing to a crowd like Twitter. It's direct engagement with another person. So I learned to associate the word and concept of care in networks last year at the Decentralized Web Summit. Tae-Yoon Choi, who runs the School for Poetic Computation, gave a workshop that was transformational and amazing because I had never thought of networks in this way before. He's working on a project called the Distributed Web of Care, with the values being distribution instead of decentralization, care instead of control, and information instead of data. And it signaled to me that we need to be modeling on human communities when we build our networks. At our core, we want to form communities and share things with family and friends. How can we build networks modeled on existing social structures? The same way that a small community is healthy makes a network healthy. Think of small businesses that are independently owned and operated and how they form the bedrock of a thriving community and local economy. These models are just as attractive in networks because networks are people. Instead of looking at successful networks of lore, let's look at the natural world, which has been thriving and surviving for millennia, not just for the past 29 crazy years of the internet existing. Onto accessibility, which is not just about providing a good experience for people with the widest range of capabilities. It's about ensuring equal access to not just the tools that we're building, but the processes with which we're building them. A lot of the work that results in greater accessibility will be in providing paths for many kinds of people with varying levels of technical expertise. And I think that it's very important to remember that the idea of building your own everything from scratch is only romantic and enticing to a very small demographic of people. And it's probably a lot of us in this room today, it's me too. That may be very freeing to you, but it's overwhelming and unwelcoming to most people. Accessibility in this context is asking the question, how can we bring down the wall that keeps new contributors and new users out? This is one of my favorite quotes. Computer literacy is really just a euphemism for forcing human beings to stretch their thinking to understand the inner workings of application logic, rather than having software-enabled products stretched to meet people's usual ways of thinking. This is exactly what I think we need to work to redefine when we're developing for the decentralized web. I want us to flip this and reverse it. So one of the things that I think is actually most important to accessibility in the decentralized web right now is shifting praise, focus, and discourse from the few to the many. In that vein, thought leaders are canceled. You heard it here first. I'm not interested in perpetuating the myth of the individual in tech for any longer. I think it's actively harmful, especially in the context of building new processes and models for making. So people, or let's be real here, men, like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Linus Torvalds, Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, no matter how you personally feel about these dudes, we have a culture built around idolizing founders and thought leaders like this, like they're these invincible self-made super nerds. And I think it's really holding us back, because this is the same attitude that obscures hundreds of years of time in the form of the work of women who built the earliest computers and networks. We need to do everything we can to ensure that this history does not repeat. So what should we be doing instead? We need to strive to build varied teams with distinct and specialized roles, because we need people, plural. The software and networks of the future should be built by the many, for the many. We need unique points of view and interesting use cases for this technology, and we can't get that in isolation. A critical part of this work will be outreach and education to ensure accessibility. We need to close the participation gap in the development of the tools of the future, and we can do so by hiring people, but not just engineers and designers. We need to hire writers, artists, illustrators. We need to hire anthropologists, ethnologists, linguists, activists, designers, technical writers, people of color, women and non-binary people. We need everyone and their perspectives to build this the right way. Because when we hire this way, we can be efficient. We can make sure we're only building the things we truly need to meet the needs of the many, instead of spending precious time and energy on tools for the few. Education is one of the most important parts of building this new web successfully. I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of language and one of my favorite ideas to think about, docs-first development. So language matters a lot. I don't know if anyone has tried to learn a little bit about the decentralized web or that protocol or blockchain, God forbid, or anything like that. But the first thing we say about these new tools and this new way of working is technical. We say cryptocurrency, decentralized network, DApp protocol, peer-to-peer, interplanetary file system. Like, this is ridiculous. It's like trying to get someone excited about space travel by jumping right in to tell them about propellants and oxidizers and trajectories when you could show them the Earth, which is very cool and beautiful. I mean, what's really going to win here? Is it going to be an HTTP-based PHP application for facilitating platonic networks, or a place for friends? Like, what if Twitter called themselves an asynchronous pub-sub messaging service instead of offering users the ability to see what's happening in the world right now? Language matters. Simple language is important. This is a quote from Sarah Richards, previously a content designer at gov.uk, and she's a big proponent of writing in clear language. And she says that it's not dumbing down, it's opening up. We are not writing clearly because people are dumb. We're writing clearly because we respect their time, interest, and attention. So clear documentation written in plain language is paramount. But what if you wrote your docs first? What if you considered the full spectrum of people who will encounter your technology from the outset? What if you planted or planned your garden before you planted it? You should set out to write a suite of documentation that covers this entire spectrum of humans using what you build. On the left is your most inclusive documentation that caters to non-technical users. This is a great place to use plain language and narrative. Storytelling is powerful. Well-designed diagrams that translate these tough concepts without using vector illustrations of clouds, that's powerful. Then, an olive branch for your front-end developers. How about an annotated pattern and module library, or whatever you think they would need? Finally, or not finally, third, an incredible README that you've tested in many different development environments to ensure that onboarding and setup goes smoothly. And then maybe you have your tech specs, your protocol specifications, and then whatever nerds want. I'm not really sure what they want to hear about caching and memory allocation or theory. I'm not sure. I don't know your life. Whatever the nerds want, give it to them. But when you first meet someone and you're telling them about tech, you should be starting on the left and moving towards the right. I mean, start super far left, even if you know that they are a technical person, because it's much more welcoming to tell a story than it is to throw a bunch of specifications at somebody. And now that you've written clear docs, test them. Test them like they're the most important user experience you have, because they are. What if we didn't force our devs to take on cognitive load to decipher docs? Maybe it's going to take you a little bit longer to release, but when developers find that your product is the one that's well documented and easy to set up, they're going to use yours and they're going to spread the word. And that's a way we can plant not just one seed, but many to increase the chances of pollination. And finally, community. My in-progress experimental solution to building community here in Portland is Dat Night. It's a meetup that I've been running since November, off and on, because I believe that building real-life communities as we build the internet of the future is essential. My goal with Dat Night, whoa, my slides stopped moving. No, they didn't. There we go. My goal with Dat Night is to educate a diverse group of people by demonstrating new models of creating online. I want these people to have a real-life community where they build things and work through problems together, so they're not left alone when they get stuck somewhere, which they will a lot, because this tech is in its infancy. My favorite thing to do is to just give people room to think. This is an event from April or May, and it was actually a study hall where people could work on whatever they'd like to with support from others. People were not even working on decentralized things. Some people were just making their own websites. It was a great atmosphere. And you can see in this photo the online, offline resources that I'm trying to provide for people. There's a bulletin board on the right for sharing ideas and finding collaborators. There's a growing zine collection that anyone can contribute to, and well, it's tiny, so you can't see it, but there is a Raspberry Pi in that room somewhere that's going to serve as a resource hub and an always-on peer that represents our community of people building on the decentralized web. But just like with the garden, my goal as an organizer here is not to tell people what to do. It is to facilitate natural processes, collaboration, conversation, and growth. The people that come now aren't just engineers and developers. We also have illustrators, artists, authors, and activists. What I really want to see is more casual meetups like this. I can't stress enough that you truly don't have to be an expert in what you're organizing, because if you build it, they will come. You probably also have to tweet about it, but they will come. And so I want the next internet to be by humans for humans. I think that mega platforms like Amazon, Google, and Facebook obscure their complexity, while the technologies that are slated to change the shape of the web reveal too much of their complexity, and they turn people off. I want us to work to find a midpoint that gives the power of the web back to the people by using accessible language, diversifying, educating the public, and relentlessly pursuing new models of creating online. I want us to create real-life community around this goal because I think that we can build this beautiful network of the future together that's entirely new. So let's get to work. Thank you very much.